So Jason Grace was introduced to be a Roman demigod, with the same reverence and reputation as Percy. But the main problem is that Jason didn't have 5 books leading into the Heroes of Olympus to show us everything that he got up to. Luckily for us, however, we do have snippets and pieces of Jason's past that can help us paint a larger picture of what he did that got him so much respect within the Roman legion. He rose through the ranks to praetor, but he did so on the backs of some respectable feats, and Hera chose him for a reason, so that's going to be today's video. We're not going to be going into his character from a writing perspective because we have a whole video about how the Burning Maze fixed Jason as a character that goes much more in depth on that side. So this one is going to be about filling in as much of Jason's history as we can, and we're talking about why Hera regarded him as an equal to Percy. Jason Grace was initially born to Beryl Grace and the Roman god Jupiter, and straight out of the gate, Jason was a cursed child who was never meant to exist. You see, Beryl Grace already had a child, Talia. Only Talia was not a daughter of Jupiter, she was the daughter of his Greek counterpart, Zeus. This meant that Beryl was the only mortal that we currently know of to win the affections of both the gods' Greek and Roman sides, which drastically upset the balance of the Olympian High Council. It was bad enough that Zeus had broken his oath not to sire any more children, but for that same mortal to then have a son with his Roman half was completely inexcusable. When Juno found out, she was rightfully furious and demanded that if Jupiter was going to have another child, that he was to name the boy after her favorite hero in the olden days. But this was not enough to placate her. Jason's memory of this time of his life are understandably a bit fuzzy, but he does remember his mother talking to him during a thunderstorm, and she told him never to be afraid of storms because it was just his father saying hello. Talia also talks about how she loved to play hide and seek with him around the apartment, and after his amnesia, she was able to fill him in on some of the details regarding where he came from and who he was. When Jason was 2, he tried to eat a stapler and ended up with the iconic scar on his upper lip, and to make this day even worse, his mother abandoned him and sent him to live with the wolves. Let's back up. Beryl became the victim of a relentless tug-of-war between Jupiter and Juno, and eventually she was forced to surrender Jason to the Wolf House, where he would be trained into a Roman combatant by Lupa, and this destroyed Beryl. She already had a drinking problem, but being forced to abandon her son completely broke her, and it was Talia's final straw as well. For all of Talia's childhood, Beryl had been begging Zeus to take her up to Olympus and to make her his immortal wife, and her fits scared a young Talia. The only reason she stayed was because she didn't trust Beryl to properly take care of Jason, but that's a topic for another day. If you'd like to see us cover all of this from Talia's perspective, be sure to let us know and we'd be happy to do it. But we do go into it a bit in our video on why Talia really hated the hunters, so be sure to check out that video too. For Jason, however, all he knew is that his mother took him and his sister on a picnic and left him in the custody of Lupa. She hugged him and told him that everything would be alright, and when she left, both of them were inconsolable. Here, he was thrust into an environment that operated on a mentality of survival of the fittest, and Lupa tested him his very first night, though we don't know exactly what this test consisted of. Given the fact that Hera is the reason he wound up here in the first place, it's problematic that she then had the audacity to use him in her half-blood exchange program. But more on that later. From here on out, Jason was taught to never show weakness in the Wolf House, but that didn't mean he always needed to show aggression, only confidence and self-assuredness. Jason learned to spar with words just as well as with a sword, so not only was he a first soldier, but a skilled negotiator and public speaker. He learned quickly, however, that being a son of Jupiter came with a host of expectations that he did not want to assume, so he took steps to separate his public perception from who he truly was. When he got to Camp Jupiter, he was offered a place in the first cohort where a son of the great King Jupiter belonged. Jason, however, denied Lupa's offer and chose a place in the 5th cohort, which had been disgraced after the fall of Michael Varus, the last legionary who tried to find the missing Roman standard. His quest had ended in disaster, and the 5th cohort became radioactive as a result, so Jason happily accepted a place among them, and they accepted him just as eagerly in turn. The bureaucracy of Camp Jupiter was very highly political, however, with everyone making calculated plays to amass more power in the legion. There was always a deal to be made or a bribe to be offered, and the inner workings of the Roman system were rotten to their core, yet everyone still looked up to Jason as the son of Jupiter, despite his efforts to reform the 5th cohort to stay out of the political game. When conflicts did arise, we know that he mediated them effectively, and instead of reaching deals based on who had more to offer them, he found fair compromises that helped everyone involved. He was always just as careful and just as calculated as the higher-ups, but never succumbed to the corruption, and this only made him more respected. When he became a centurion, he started getting closer to Rhena, since the 5th cohort was often in charge of cleaning out the basilisk's nest, in part because the title was still cursed, and in part because Jason had angered some very powerful people who were taking it out on his cohort. When he was 15, he and Rhena undertook a quest to Charleston, where the CSS Huntley was said to harbor torpedoes made of Imperial gold, and since the secret to forging raw Imperial gold had been lost, any supply that they could find was invaluable to the Legion. By this point, Rhena had developed some feelings for Jason, though Jason only ever saw Rhena as a dear friend and trusted comrade. This is where the ghostly figure first appeared to Rhena, but whenever Jason tried to approach, the figure disappeared, until eventually, Rhena was able to make contact. Later, we would learn that this was Aphrodite, but Jason did not know this at the time. We also get some other hints at quests he went on, and we know that Aeolus recognized him from his time staying in the palace of the wind god while waiting to slay Kitos Troy, more commonly known as the Trojan sea monster. When Poseidon and a small cohort of rogue gods tried to overthrow Zeus, Poseidon was cast out of Olympus for a time, and was cursed to live as a mortal within the city of Troy. King Laomedon forced a now human Poseidon to build a wall around the entire city brick by brick on his own, and Poseidon reluctantly agreed if it meant that he could reclaim his place as a god. When King Laomedon refused to pay Poseidon, however, Poseidon remembered, and when he became a god again, the Kitos Troy was sent as a physical manifestation of Poseidon's wrath. This monster was large enough to terrorize the entire city of Troy, and now we have evidence that Jason slew the beast single-handedly, though we don't know exactly where, when, or how this took place. We also know that Jason is familiar with Bacchus, since Jason had taken a quest for the wine god some years ago, and we know that he's specifically tasked with finding his missing leopard in Sonoma. What's interesting is that with how many quests that Jason has gone on, they obviously did not have the same pause on quests that Camp Half-Blood did when Luke came back from his failed one. What's less clear, however, is just how impressive this quest actually was, because in the Mark of Athena, Jason specifically says that he intentionally took the worst quests in order to distance himself from his parentage. And while we're confident that slaying something like the Kitos Troy was well respected and widely acclaimed, we can't say the same thing for finding Bacchus' leopard simply because we don't know the details. By this point, however, he was an incredibly powerful demigod who had proven himself on multiple occasions, so much so that when the Titan War found a place on the Western Front, Jason was first called to arms. What's really interesting to note here, however, is that we don't know exactly how involved the Romans were before the Battle of Manhattan, because Mount Tam rose as far back as Titan's Curse. We find it incredibly unlikely that the Romans didn't notice a stirring hub of ancient magic rising in their own backyards, so we believe that the Romans were very active in California between the Titan's Curse and the last Olympiad. We just don't know how much they did. This is probably where Jason honed his first skills of battlefield command, since most quests only involve a couple of demigods, not entire legions like Jason is used to commanding. So we believe he spent the greater part of a year and a half commanding battles across California as Kronos grew more and more powerful. This all came to a head when the Romans took the fight straight to the doorstep of Mount Orthus, where Atlas was still trapped under the sky. Rhaena tells Annabeth about how Jason marched through the Garden of Hesperides and the halls of the Titan's base until he came face to face with the Titan Krios himself. Remember, Percy fought 2 Titans in Manhattan, the first of which was Hyperion, and in that fight, Percy himself says that without the curse of Achilles, every bone in his body would have been broken. The second fight was with Kronos, who was still trapped in a host body, far from his full power, and he still beat Percy in the throne room. Which is why Percy had to make the choice to trust Luke, because he knew that he was outmatched. Jason, however, with no curse of the Styx and no personal connection to exploit, defeated Krios in single combat. After he beat Krios, he toppled the Iron Throne of Kronos, and the Romans promoted him to the rank of Praetor in the aftermath of the Titan War, meaning that he was only Praetor for a few short months before he got brainwashed by Hera. They lifted him on shields and celebrated their victory, and he used his reputation to try to change the policies of the camp from inside out. All this time, Jason scoffed at the rigidity of Roman tradition and believed that the camp had to be more flexible if they were going to survive long term. He started small, trying to change the name of the 12th Legion to the 1st Legion, but he was immediately stonewalled despite holding the highest office in the land. Eventually, he came to realize that politics were not his game. He was a diplomat and a soldier, not a government official. He was not cut out to write policy or enforce rules. He was designed to problem solve, and the office of Praetor was not the best place for Jason to make the impact he was wanting. After the summer of the Titan War, Jason welcomed both Hazel and Nico into camp, where Nico introduced himself as the son of Pluto and offered to be an ambassador, though Camp Jupiter still did not know about the existence of Camp Half-Blood. What these stories are missing, however, is the key ingredient that makes us love Percy so much, which are the moments in between heroics. We don't love Percy because he recovered the Master Bolt, or held up the sky, or defeated Kronos. We love him because we get to see the moments in between where he loves his mother, struggles with girl problems, and dives headlong into danger for his friends because it's the right thing to do. Again, this point is expanded in much more detail in our Burning Maze video, but we are glad that Jason's character got much more depth after the Heroes of Olympus. There is a reason why he's regarded as the hero of the Roman Legion, and there is a reason why he was specifically chosen by Hera to join the Quest of the Seven. The introduction of the 2 camps would not have worked with anyone else. It had to be Jason, and this is why. It's because he always fought for the little guy and always wanted to inspire real change. He grew into a hero in his own right, not because of his parentage, but in spite of it. Jason is not a soldier of blind loyalty. He is a diplomat and negotiator above all else, and this is why we've been campaigning for a Jason origin novel for so long. So is it Hera's fault that Jason was left to the wolves? Yes. Is it also her fault that he was plucked away from his home, given amnesia, and subsequently started to abandon his Roman ideology? Also, yes. Is Hera the absolute worst? We'll leave that up to you. But that's our breakdown of Jason's entire past and why he was chosen to be Hera's first move. But what do you guys think? As always, we love this series, we love talking about the series, and we want to hear your thoughts down below. Take care, friends, watch out for your cohort, and we'll see you in the next one.